and they're going to join in this battle. And this really isn't all that big of a force from Fantasy. But on the other hand, Medic and Marine are strong, and we'll see all the Zerglings go down for 0, but, oh man, a couple Mutalisks getting dropped in that fight too, though. But Zero's at least managed to keep Fantasy back in his base. He's got to do this for a little bit longer. I think he'll be able to, though. And then he'll have Hive Tech up, Defilers up, and then he'll be in a pretty... He'll be in a pretty good position to hold off any pushes. Fantasy will have Thanos to be forced to expand, play even more macro game. Yeah, Fantasy, he's got tanks now, which will help fight off against these lurkers, but his Medic and Marine force is kind of getting whittled down by these Mutalisks. I don't know if we have a science facility from Fantasy yet, because that would definitely help him deal with that Mutalisk stress. And wow, he's just playing super safe, sitting his tanks back behind that bunker, turtling up. Oh wow, they're in the siege range of those lurkers. And 2 lurkers getting sniped. So that's great for Fantasy. And now Zero's on the run. Hive's still morphing, so we don't have any Defiler Mon going down yet. But Fantasy is going to have to slow push against these lurkers all the way back to Zero's main. So I don't think Zero's in too terrible a position yet. We'll see how this continues to work out for him. Wow, 3 factories coming down for Fantasy. It looks like he's going to transition into mech. He's researching Vulture upgrades, probably. He doesn't have mines yet. I see Vulture out, so it's almost certainly Vulture upgrades. And there's the Irradiate from Science Vessel. I think it only got like 1 Mutalisk and didn't do too much damage to the clump, though, so that's a pretty good job from Zero. It's always a micro battle to split your Irradiated Mutalisk clump when Science Vessels come out. What are you doing, SCVs? I'm confused. Army coming down probably to get mech upgrades, since Fantasy is committing so heavily to mech here with his 3 factories. This is a very interesting strategy, and I really like it. Because tanks are only going to get more powerful against the units that Zero wants to produce from here on out. He wants to make Swarm, which obviously M&M are bad against, and then tanks and vultures are much better against Swarm, and obviously Ultralisk mines and tanks are what you use to deal with them if you can't use your SK Terran to full effect, which is really hard to do. And I think honestly, if you're not in a pretty good position going into the late game, Fantasy double expanding with all these factories, yet another layer of this onion of a build Fantasy has prepared is being revealed to us here. So I traditionally Zero would be expecting a push. He'd be expecting Fantasy to be moving back into his base, trying to hit him before Defiler attack. But instead, with the mech, he's building tanks, he's mining up the middle, and then attempting to harass with vultures, while he expands and gets a huge macro going, gets huge economy. I don't know how great of an idea this is. It seems like there's a huge window open for Zero to see this and react to it and own his stuff. So, and that's the problem with mines against Zerg. Zerglings are so cheap and fast. They can clear minefields, well, much more effectively than, say, in TVP, when you have Zealots, which are fast and strong, but not nearly as cheap as a Zergling. On the other hand, when a mine takes out like 8 Zerglings like that, you're pretty excited. Or when it takes out a Lurker, you're even more excited. So Fantasy is Zero is pushing units all over this little. Fantasy's got this nice little arc right here, and wow, Vulture ass coming on, getting into Zero's natural, killing drones. Although Fantasy's not microing these poor vultures, so they're not being maximally effective. But Zero's trying to push Fantasy's little arc of defense right here, defending his 2 new bases he's decided to take. And he's only having minimal success. He's been pushing all over the arc sort of haphazardly, and I think it's mostly to get rid of Fantasy's static defenses, get rid of his mines, make him move his tanks around before Zero really commits. And in the meantime, Fantasy, he's using this Vulture harass to attempt to buy him time, and 3 Mutalisks from earlier in the game coming back to haunt Fantasy and harass, but Fantasy's still got M&M, so there's only so much that can do. He probably is going to have to throw down a turret or 2 at these other 2 bases, which isn't something he wants to do, but it just doesn't really matter. On the other hand, he may just try to be a baller and kill off these Mutalisks and fail at being a baller and lose all of his SCVs, which is definitely something I could see Fantasy doing. And I'm pretty sure Fantasy's M&M army is kind of dwindling here. We haven't seen too much Science Vessel going down there eventually. We haven't seen much reinforcement of Fantasy's M&M army. We've seen mostly, it's kind of spread out. We've seen mostly tanks and vultures being produced recently. But now he's going to have the combined economy of 4 bases, and he's going to be able to really do both. He's going to have M&M coming out and tanks and vultures. And that was an epic mine, despite the fact that it took out one of Fantasy's units. And I think Zero's really in trouble. His timing window before he has to face a 4-base Terran as a 4-base Zerg is pretty much, it's going to evaporate really soon. He needs to get stuff done now, and I don't know that he's really going to be able to. Fantasy's delayed, I think, enough with vultures and mines that he's going to have time, and I imagine we're going to get momentarily, maybe not. Okay, the commentator was thinking about showing us Fantasy's macro and decided instead we need to see Zeros. And all of those, that's a unfortunate fleet of Scourge that's going to wreak havoc upon the poor Terrans. Right now. Buy Science Vessels. So, the Fantasy obviously doesn't like that, but it's not going to matter too much. And you notice he's leaving his defensive arc. He's got some units over here, and he's pushing down into this 3rd base, into the other main of this map. And while Nidus Canal is going to go down, so it's going to make it a lot harder for Zero to reinforce this. And Zero has, like, no units. He's expended all his units, like, beating against Fantasy's defenses like a crazy person in a rubber room against a wall. And that's obviously not something once. Plague on the tanks, great thing to do. I don't even think Fantasy has any SCVs up here, but yeah, wow, there's just factories all over. That's like 7 factories for Fantasy. Well, I don't know what happened to all of his racks. I guess he floated them away. He doesn't want to play M&M at all. He's committing. He says, I got 3 gas. I'm going to play mech. What are you going to do about it? You've only got 4 gas. Actually, now that I think about it, Fantasy might have 4 gas too. Because I think they added gas to the mineral only on Glaive in Neo Glaive. Yes, they did. So Fantasy has 4 gas too, which explains why he's going mech. He's got lots of gas. 4 gas mech is kind of like a 4 gas serve. And wow, that was a mine that did lots of negative things to Fantasy's forces. On the other hand, I think Fantasy's in a really good... Oh, man, Mind Drags. Ouch. Mind Drags... I think that even though mech play is probably... You know, the rise of popularity of mech play was really almost a year ago now. I think that Zerg players have not fully realized the implications of Mind Drags, and they can do a lot more to punish Terran players by dragging mines around, because like I said, Zerglings are so effective at it. And now we're going to see Ultralisk, 4 gas Ultralisk, supported by Defilers coming out for Zero, so that's obviously going to help him. We're seeing 4-1 for the Ultras, so not quite as upgraded as they could be. But the problem is, Fantasy's got mines and siege tanks, and lots of them, and that's exactly the counter to Ultralisk and Defilers. And Zero's really in a tough position here. He's probably going to lose this base, and I think he's trying to pick up something at the 530, but he doesn't want to be losing bases when Fantasy's pretty much equal in bases with him.